Most people assume fuel goes in the wings because there's room for it there. That's not wrong, but it's not the real answer. The actual reason has nothing to do with available space. It has everything to do with where tens of tons of shifting mass can be carried without destabilizing an aircraft in flight. And on landing, the tires beneath that aircraft will accelerate from a standstill to highway speeds in under a second. If those tires were filled with ordinary air, they would behave unpredictably. Engineers knew that decades ago, and the solution they chose is still in use on every commercial aircraft flying today. If that kind of engineering detail is what keeps you watching, subscribe to Aviast and leave a like, it helps us keep going deeper. The fuselage seems like the obvious place to store fuel. It's large, centrally located, and structurally robust. But engineers aren't designing around what's convenient, they're designing around what keeps a several hundred-ton machine stable across a 7-hour flight. And the central problem isn't where fuel fits. It's what happens as that fuel disappears. A fully loaded wide-body airliner carries well over 100 tons of fuel. Unlike cargo or passengers, that mass doesn't stay constant. It burns continuously from the moment of takeoff. Which means the aircraft's weight distribution is changing the entire time, and anything that shifts the center of gravity too far forward or too far aft creates serious consequences. Move it too far forward and the aircraft demands more control input to hold its pitch. Move it too far aft and stability degrades, making the aircraft sensitive to even minor disturbances. Either way, fuel efficiency drops and crew workload increases. So engineers don't just ask where to put the fuel. They ask where burning it will cause the least disruption to the aircraft's balance. The wings sit directly over the region that generates lift, and close to the aircraft's acceptable center of gravity envelope. As fuel drains from the wing tanks, the balance shifts only marginally. The aircraft stays predictable, stable, and efficient, without the flight management system constantly making corrections to compensate. But there's a second reason, and it's less obvious. A wing in flight is under enormous bending force. Lift acts along the entire span, pulling upward. The weight of the fuselage, passengers, and cargo pulls downward from the center. The wing behaves like a long horizontal beam loaded from the middle, and the stress concentrates at its root, the point where it joins the fuselage. That's the most structurally critical location on the entire aircraft. An empty wing amplifies that bending. Add fuel distributed along the span, and the fuel itself acts as a counterweight against the lift force. The wing bends less. Stress at the root decreases. Material fatigue builds up more slowly over decades of service cycles. This is why the design is called a wet wing. The wing doesn't contain tanks, it is the tank. The internal structure of the wing, the spars, the ribs, the load-bearing frames, already creates enclosed volumes. Engineers seal and segment those volumes, allowing fuel to sit inside them without adding weight, without modifying the airframe, and without consuming any of the fuselage space that pays for the flight. Every cubic meter of the fuselage represents payload, passengers, cargo, revenue. The wing gives engineers a large usable volume at no economic cost. On the Boeing 737, this logic is expressed in the aircraft's 3-tank layout, 2 tanks in the wings and 1 central tank inside the center wing box, the structural section where the 2 wings meet beneath the fuselage. The rule governing which tank feeds the engines first is not arbitrary. If the center tank holds fuel, it burns first. The reason is straightforward: fuel in the center adds mass close to the fuselage, slightly degrading the preferred load distribution. Engineers want that mass gone early, so the aircraft settles into a configuration where the remaining fuel sits in the wings, where it does the most structural good and causes the least balance disruption. Fueling an aircraft is as precisely managed as any other pre-flight operation. Fuel enters through a single port, typically located under the wing, and is distributed through a controlled sequence: wing tanks first, center tank if the mission requires it. The fuel itself is aviation kerosene, a tightly specified mixture that stays fluid at -50 degrees Celsius, resists crystallization at altitude, and burns reliably across a wide range of engine operating conditions. The system that moves fuel from tank to engine is built with multiple redundancies. Every tank carries more than one pump. Backup feed modes are integrated from the design stage. And the tanks include systems that suppress the buildup of flammable vapor above the fuel surface, because it isn't the liquid that ignites, it's the vapor above it. Occasionally, an aircraft must shed fuel deliberately. This sounds counterintuitive, but it comes down to a hard engineering constraint. The maximum weight at which an aircraft is certified to land is always lower than its maximum takeoff weight. Landing loads are severe, and the airframe is designed around them. If a plane must return to the airport shortly after departure, because of a medical emergency, a mechanical issue, or deteriorating weather, it may simply be too heavy to touch down safely. Burning fuel takes time. On some aircraft, a fuel dump system provides a faster option. Fuel is released through nozzles near the wingtips, where it atomizes into fine droplets and evaporates before it can reach the ground in liquid form. The procedure is regulated, geographically controlled, and reserved for genuine emergencies. Now consider what happens at the other end of the flight, when all that engineering work comes down to a few seconds on a runway. The main landing gear touches the ground first. Those wheels have been stationary since liftoff. The aircraft is moving forward at somewhere between 250 and 270 km per hour, roughly the speed of a racing car at full throttle. The tires hit the runway surface while spinning at zero. In a fraction of a second, they must match the aircraft's ground speed. The smoke that billows from the wheels at touchdown isn't a sign of anything wrong. It's rubber meeting tarmac under violent friction, heating to temperatures between 150 and 200 degrees Celsius within the first few seconds of contact. The main gear carries roughly 90% of the aircraft's landing weight. The nose gear follows a moment later, taking on the remaining load and handling directional control. On a large airliner, that total weight can exceed 300, 400, or even 500 tons. Distributing it across 14 to 22 wheels, rather than just a few, keeps the load on each individual tire within survivable limits. Smaller aircraft typically use between 6 and 12 wheels for the same reason. Each tire is a layered structure. The outer casing uses high-grade synthetic rubber formulated to withstand sustained friction and heat. Inside sit multiple plies of nylon cord, strong fibers arranged in overlapping layers that prevent the rubber from stretching or tearing under load. Steel belts add rigidity and help the tire hold its shape when the pressure inside is pushing outward with enormous force. A standard car tire runs at around 30 to 35 pounds per square inch. An aircraft tire runs above 200 pounds per square inch, roughly 6 times higher. And that pressure is maintained not with air, but with nitrogen. Since the late 1980s, the FAA has required commercial aircraft to use nitrogen in their tires rather than ambient air, and the standard is now followed across the global industry. The reasons are specific and practical. Regular air always contains moisture. At altitude, where outside temperatures drop to around -50 degrees Celsius, that moisture can freeze inside the wheel assembly, a problem nitrogen eliminates entirely, because it is dry. Air also contains oxygen, which reacts with rubber and metal over time, accelerating degradation. Nitrogen is chemically inert, it doesn't react with the tire's internal components. Extending service life. And nitrogen pressure responds less dramatically to temperature swings. During a landing, the tire heats rapidly due to friction. Nitrogen maintains more stable internal pressure across that temperature spike than ordinary air would. Finally, nitrogen does not support combustion. Under extreme heat and heavy loads, that matters. Airlines replace aircraft tires every few weeks under normal operating schedules, despite all this engineering. The conditions they survive, repeated impacts, extreme temperatures, high pressure, rapid spin-up from zero, are simply that demanding. Which brings up something worth thinking about. Landing gear design varies considerably between aircraft families, and engineers continue to refine wheel count, tire pressure, and load distribution with each new generation. What aspect of this system surprised you most? The fuel distribution logic, the structural role fuel plays in the wing, or the engineering behind the tires themselves? Leave your answer in the comments. There's no single correct take here, and the variety of answers is usually interesting. The 200 psi of pressure held inside a tire not much larger than a car wheel, against the weight of a fully loaded wide body at 260 km per hour, that number says more about what modern aviation engineering actually is than almost any other single fact. It's not about large, obvious systems. It's about precise, invisible ones. If this changed the way you think about what happens every time a plane takes off or lands, subscribe to Aviast, there's a great deal more to explore.